Welcome to Module 6. Module 6, we will focus on professional communication, delivering bad news, unfavorable communication, and we will continue to work on our resumes. In this module introduction, we will feature Ellis from the Van Winkle Law Firm, an instructor within the Business Programs Department, focusing on our Business 115 Business Law course. With that, I wish you guys a great week. Good morning, Anderson. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living, and your role at the college.
Okay, I'm Anderson Ellis. I'm a local attorney with the Van Winkle Law Firm. My office is over on Main Street, down near the Fresh Market side of Main Street. And our office is based in Asheville. We have 40 attorneys in 2 offices. I'm here in the Hendersonville office. Grew up in Hendersonville. I'm from here. And my practice is business corporate practice. So I do mergers, acquisitions, people buying and selling businesses, and then forming businesses, dissolving businesses, nonprofits, and just contract review, anything that a business might need.
Awesome. And what do you do at the college?
At the college, I'm an adjunct instructor in the business department, so I teach Business 115, which is the online course for Intro to Business Law. So for people that are, either have a requirement or have aspirations to get a business degree, they get the introduction to the legal side of business in my class.
Awesome. I love that we have a subject matter expert teaching that course and part of the business programs team.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about professional communication. With your role in your current workplace, tell us about the importance in professional communication.
Sure. Well, obviously communication is incredibly important and in sort of every aspect, especially when you're, depending on your level in the business or the industry that you're in. If you're lower level, I think the need to be able to communicate with your peers, with your superiors, people that you're trying to, either provide guidance to or accomplish tasks for, as you progress in your business or as you own a business and you have people who are subordinate and working for you. I think it's incredibly important to be able to effectively communicate to them what your needs are, what your expectations are. And then I think providing feedback, the ability to communicate clearly, provide feedback that people can take constructively, whether it's good or bad. I think people need to be able to understand what you're saying.
Oh, I love what you said. You touched on internal communications, external communications with the customer, and also that important feedback loop where we actually get the customer to engage and take action, whether it be customer service, a purchase point, or anything along those lines. Now, for your role as an industry professional, let's talk about this module. This module focuses on maybe delivering not great news, so bad news or unfavorable news both internally and externally. Share some strategies on conveying negative or unfavorable news.
Sure. So I think the first thing you have to consider when you've got negatives or unfavorable news to deliver is to whom you are delivering it. I think obviously there are different strategies if you're delivering, in my business, I'm direct to a client. Mm-hmm. If you're delivering bad news to an employee, to a group of employees, say the business that you're running, to a client or a customer, or potentially to a group of customers, I think your strategy for delivering that news has to be different. And I see that there's 2 ways. I think you can deliver it both directly and indirectly. Direct delivery, sort of in my business, preferred method of delivering all kinds of communication information is direct. So that would be, acknowledging immediately what the news is, acknowledging that it's not good, but saying, unfortunately, this is what has happened, or this is what is going to happen, or this is what you need to know. Following that up with an explanation, you can certainly soften it. Mm-hmm. But in law school, they teach you when you're making an argument in front of judges or in front of a jury, it's called removing the sting. So if you know there's something bad, it's like a bee sting or removing the stinger. You get out in front of it and you say, I know this is bad. I'm going to address it. We can talk about it later, but this is the bad news right here up front, so that you can go ahead and start processing that. Indirect method, I think, is probably more for things that, so we'll give you an example, maybe if there's something negative that's happened in the company, you're addressing a group of employees or something, for instance, a key employee has been let go, or there's some change that people are going to be concerned about. You might not want to just come right out. It might be a little bit, it might seem a little bit uncaring or callous to just say, this is what has happened. But you still need to deliver that information. So even if you start off by saying, the business is great, we've got great numbers, we've got great a great team. Everybody is working together well. Unfortunately, there are some things that have happened. We wanted to go ahead and address them so that you can begin to process it. Starting off with something good and sort of building up before you go to the bad news, as opposed to starting with the bad news and then trying to build up from there. I think those are two, depending on the audience, really effective ways of delivering negative things.
So great point. So you're talking about direct communication directly to the customer depending on the situation at hand. Also removing the sting. I love that. That's a great example. You also just spoke about indirect. So indirect is really what we call a softening technique, where we kind of soften it and sandwich the unfortunate news, kind of a customer recovery and retention effort, whether it's an internal customer, fellow colleague, or an employee, or looking externally to the customer as a way to be sure. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we talked about conveying or sharing the bad news in a written format or some other type of format presenting. Let's talk about presenting bad or negative news. So what are some effective techniques for presenting bad, negative, or unfavorable news to customers?
So I think one thing that you have to remember when you're delivering bad news to customers is that you don't want to, especially depending on what the content of the message is, you don't want to convey to the customer that something that is a big deal or something that is negative isn't a big deal or isn't negative. I think colloquially people will call that gaslighting, which I think is a little bit of a charged term now, but it does have a very real application. You don't want, if something is negative and needs to be addressed and needs to be presented to somebody, you don't want to present it in a way that minimizes there's effective ways to, like I said, take the sting out of it, but without saying, this may seem like a big deal, but it isn't a big deal.
Yes.
To say, this is a big deal, but here is what we're doing to fix it, or here's what we're doing to make sure that it minimizes the negative impact on you. I would say in my industry, there's times where we'll just use a broad example where there's a security data breach. Okay, so a company has a security data breach. They have to inform a large number of customers that that something bad has happened and their personal information may have gotten out. You don't want to say this isn't a big deal because it is a big deal. If I get an email or I get a letter from somebody saying, your social security number, credit card might have gotten leaked out, that's a big deal. So you don't want to say it's no big deal, this happened, but don't worry about it. What you do want to say is, what is happening to make sure that this negative thing doesn't impact you any more than it absolutely has to? What is our company doing to take responsibility for this and to fix it? So I think that's, again, the combination of direct and indirect to say, this is what happened, it is a big deal, we are going to do this to fix it, it's not going to happen again. That would be a much more sort of business to customer application. I think that same idea can be done to individuals, it can be done to employees, superiors, but that would be my biggest application of how to present information in my industry would be to own it, take responsibility for it, but then express to the person either how it's going to be remedied or how the damage is going to be minimized.
Sure, and I think part of that is also validating the concern shared by the customer.
Sure.
You're right, but we understand that you are concerned. That doesn't mean that we are saying we did it. We're saying we understand you are concerned about what occurred, and then here's what we're going to do taking place.
Absolutely. There's not necessarily fault. I mean,
Right.
there's a difference between apologizing because we've done something wrong. Certainly that happens in some situations. Sometimes things happen, even with the best intentions, even with the best security, that things will happen. And using that same example, you could have all the best safeguards in the world and negative things can happen. So you can take responsibility without assigning fault. We failed in this way is different than we understand this has happened. It's not comfortable for anybody. Here's what's going to happen to fix it.
Excellent. And I love that trust building through that accountability piece. So taking ownership of it.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to move into professionalism in the digital landscape. Let's talk about social media and the importance of professionalism, social media from external and internal company perspectives.
So I think social media is interesting, and from what I've seen in teaching my course, I know that the students at Blue Ridge have a variety of ages, experiences in the workforce. So I think understanding initially that every generation or group of people that is involved in the workforce has a different experience with social media.
Sure.
So I grew up in a time, Facebook came out when I was a sophomore in college. My sister, my daughter, they have always had social media. And then my parents have never used social media. So you've got a whole variety of people and their experience with social media is different. As younger people are coming up, obviously your individual use of social media whether you realize it when you're young or not, will impact the future. What you post doesn't go away, all of those negative things. So I think, having personal responsibility for what you are putting on social media, how you're portraying yourself, and then also sort of making sure as you are, growing past education into entering the workforce that you sort of clean that up as much as you can to make sure you present yourself in the best way. Social media from a professional side, as far as, again, a company or a professional presenting themselves to the world, I would say that social media is a tempting thing to get involved in for professional purposes. For marketing purposes, it's wonderful. For customer attraction, it's wonderful. For customer interaction, it can be a mixed bag.
Right.
And I'll use an example from my practice. Things like Yelp and other, Google reviews, things where people can actually leave feedback for a business, on the face can be very positive things, but when a professional or business owner allows themselves to interact with people in that way, as if they were sitting across from them at a table and justifying a bad review or trying to explain themselves or pass blame for something bad that's happened. Again, we were talking about, taking responsibility. In social media, all of the nuance is gone. All of it is gone. And so a person who receives a bad review and then responds in kind to say, well, this is why your review is no good, only serves to diminish the standing of the professional. It doesn't do anything to help repair customer relationships. It doesn't, I think I advise my clients always to respond with something very generic, but something that is professional.
Sure.
We acknowledge you had a bad experience. We never want anybody to have a bad experience. We hope that you'll give us another opportunity. And that is not satisfying for people who are used to interacting in depth online, but it forces some more of those nuanced interactions with customers or with other professionals to happen in person instead of online, where everything is exposed.
So it's really, you're encouraging choosing the correct channel for that interaction, which is so important, especially in the digital landscape.
Yep.
I tend to find that social media, especially professionally, becomes reactionary from a customer complaint standpoint. They want that instant reaction from the business. And really, when they are working with marketing teams are using this as a social listening tool. What are customers saying? How can we quickly address this complaint? But if not addressed appropriately, it does tend to spiral or work out unfavorably for the company, most importantly.
Sure.
Now let's talk about guide rails. With the businesses you have worked with, or what do you recommend professionally as far as businesses developing social media guide rails, policies, and procedures for the teams using social media? Is that something you do?
Sure. So I think your industry specific will dictate a lot of that. If you have a business or you're in an industry where integration into the online world is important, if you work in, for instance, digital marketing or something like that, where your actual involvement and expertise is a selling point for your business, allowing your employees with fairly liberal guidelines on conduct and what they should and shouldn't do online is helpful to your business. As they show their expertise, they're attracting customers. For something that is less reliant upon online, I think informing I don't advise my clients necessarily to really put in place very strict guidelines on what people's personal use of social media can be.
Sure.
I think it's, everybody, presumably, who's being hired is an adult, a responsible adult who has at least enough responsibility to take on the job role that you're assigning them. What they do when they go home at night is really none of the business's business until it affects the business.
Yes.
And so letting them know that their conduct outside the workplace, while it may not be related directly to their job performance, is something that the company cares about. Just like if they went into a local restaurant and started screaming obscenities, if they go home and go online and start screaming obscenities, it's essentially the same thing.
Sure.
And so letting them know what those requirements are, that they conduct themselves in a professional way, at least in ways that are public facing, without necessarily setting, you can't use this social media platform. We have to have your logins. We have to do this. I think that's a little. Some companies try to do some of that, and I think that's a little bit too much. I think there are certainly, whether they're legal or sort of informal rights that people have to conduct themselves how they like, but they should always know. I think your conduct. You should always know that your conduct can affect your job. It can affect your standing in your company, whether you think that it's relevant or not. It's up to your your superiors, the people who own the company, or your customers essentially to decide whether they think your conduct is acceptable.
Absolutely. So we touched on that a little bit in Business 365, where we teach students that their personal brand image, whether it's digital or in person, is continually built and developed over time. Whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, Meta platforms, whatever that looks like, they are building a digital footprint and a brand image that is representative of themselves as a career-seeking person or as an employee within an organization.
Absolutely. And if you think that potential employers don't look for what your digital footprint is when they're deciding on whether to hire you, or they're looking at your advancement and things like that, they absolutely are. I mean, it's one of the first things I do when we're looking at hiring somebody for my firm is to see what is out there. We've had interns, we've had potential attorney hires who maybe didn't get as far along in the recruitment process as they would have if they hadn't had really unfortunate things that showed up online for their with their background. And
Sure.
I'm not talking about a sort of going all the way back into when somebody was a very young person or was irresponsible or whatever, but I am saying that to make sure that you own what people are going to see when they go online and look for you. Make sure it represents you in the way that you want to be represented, because they'll be looking at it.
Absolutely. I've always been encouraged, and this may be antiquated at this point, but to do a quick Google search or a social search of yourself, especially if you're looking for a new job or moving through that process, to see what comes up. So that way you are aware of what the potential job interviewer is seeing.
Absolutely.
Or the company that you are applying, what they will see if they do a quick search for you.
Sure. And it's not... It is not self-aggrandizing to have something like a Google alert with your name on it
Sure.
that will email you if your name comes up. You never know, especially when you're involved in outside organizations, when you're involved in in an educational environment, clubs or something like that. You want to know when there is something that refers to you online. So if you have something like a Google alert or some other way of being informed when your name or your likeness comes up online, it's just good to be aware of it.
That's an excellent tip. Thank you for that. All right, we're rounding out. Let's talk about resumes. Professional formatting. We have seen it all. And in this course, we are working on developing professional resumes to put in front of a mock interviewer that they are then prepared to use as they apply for jobs, as they enter the career force or the workforce. So let's talk about that. Recommendations for formatting and organization of qualification and skills. So we've already done our job descriptions, what we've done, our positions within the organization. Now we are looking at qualifications and skills. Tell us about it.
So when I was doing my resume when I was younger, I was always told keep it at one page. Now I don't know what the education says now. I see resumes now from people that are very qualified. Obviously, if one page isn't long enough, you can go into two. As far as your qualifications, skills and qualifications, I think if it's important to the job that you're looking for, the industry that you're looking for, it's important to put on there. If it's a skill that not everyone has, but will distinguish you from other candidates, that's important. At this point, knowing how to use an Office suite of tools, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, is not a distinguishing skill. Not that there's an assumption that you'll know how to do that, but I think it probably eats real estate on your resume that is better served for other things. But if you are trained, whether it's, I see people applying for legal jobs. If you know how to code in Python, I may not need a Python coder, but that to me is a skill that not everybody who's applying for my job has, that may very well translate into a way of thinking or a skill set that is applicable to the job. So if you have something that is interesting, that is unique, if you are a world champion yo-yoer, I don't hire somebody for their yo-yo skills, but it also may very well show a dedication to learning something that doesn't have direct financial benefit, but shows your ability to focus and learn and achieve. That would be a really useful skill set for an employer. So I think identifying those things that will set you apart, they're important to include, not necessarily filling it up just so that you have a good chunk of text there is important.
Right. So skills and qualifications relevant to the job, skills and qualifications that set you apart.
Right.
While you may have experience in Microsoft Office, that's great. maybe don't eat up real estate on your resume with that. But if you have an Excel certification, maybe put it on there.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've gone the next step than just sort of using it in the normal course and scope of your life, if you do have a special certification, if you have done projects that show, I mean, I am not good at spreadsheets. I will admit that. People that are very good at spreadsheets amaze me because Microsoft Excel and spreadsheet programs can do amazing things. So I think if there's a way, if you are a spreadsheet wizard, a way of making that appear on your resume so that people know, or can identify something that they don't understand and ask you about it in an interview, because that's ultimately what you want to do, is you want to bring up things in your resume so that your next conversation with a potential employer can be colored with what you have on your resume. So if you put certified under Microsoft spreadsheet program, I may not have any idea what that means. But when I say, I see this spreadsheet on your resume, what does that mean? You can then dazzle me with all of your knowledge of what you can do with spreadsheets. Then I'll go, wow, okay, I never even thought that I could reorganize my legal practice with a spreadsheet. Okay, this person might be exactly what I'm looking for.
I like that. So including skills, qualifications, and certifications that prompt further discussion and conversation.
Absolutely.
Love it. Okay, last question. The one tip. One tip to assist students as they begin working and or submitting their resume to potential job positions. So these are students, they've been through business programs, they are set for graduation, and they are working on career planning, ready to enter the workforce. What is that one tip?
I think one tip that I would give would be, especially as it comes to work experience. Like I said, I know that students that are graduating from Blue Ridge have a variety of previous experience. You know, their education may be directly out of high school. It might be after 30 years of working in a different industry.
Yes.
And I think for me, when I look at resumes, I'm not looking for, when I look at the previous positions held and previous jobs held, what I look for consistency,
Yes.
but I also look for where there may be spaces, gaps. And what I would tell people, because I think people when they go in to talk to a potential employer, or they see that there's a, for instance, there's a 10-year gap where somebody was raising children, or they had a sick family member, or they just frankly had a job they didn't want to put on their resume. The employer will see that. And I think owning those and knowing that the employer is going to see them, they're not bad. I don't look at a gap in employment history as a bad thing. But I do want to know sort of a very general explanation for it. And I've never once penalized a potential hire because they said that was a time when I was wrapped up in taking care of my sick relative, or I was raising a family, or my spouse was working and so I took a step back for a little bit. That's not a negative. There is a positive thing for an employer in everything. So look at your resume, look for where the questions are going to come, whether it's gaps in employment, whether it's jobs that don't fit in what you're looking for, whether it's something else, and just be ready to address them. And don't assume that they're a bad thing. Don't assume that somebody's going to look at it and go, oh no, they didn't work for 10 years. What am I going to do? They must have lost all their skills. Just say, this is what it was. Without going into too much information that you feel uncomfortable. The employer's not entitled to know your life story if you don't want to share it, but to be able to say, this is what was going on here, and to have confidence that the employer is going to say, I understand that. Everybody has their own story, and now you're here, and we're really looking to see if you fit. So just look at your resume, know your history, be ready to address those things, but don't assume that they're bad.
I love what you shared. That's perfect. Following up on that, so that first question that the employer traditionally asks in an interview is, tell us about yourself. Is that a good opportunity to share some of that so that way you're kind of guiding the storyline?
I think so. I think some of it will be very personal to you and how you feel. There is an element, but to take it back to what we first talked about, of removing that sting. If there is something that you think should be addressed, address it. Address it right off. This is that direct presentation of bad news. If there is something on your resume or something in your history that you say, I just want to put this out there, you can do that. I also think there's an element of too that if you do feel self-conscious about a gap in your employment or a gap in your education or something like that you think is a weakness in your resume, you don't necessarily have to draw attention to it. You don't have to say, I just want to say up front, I didn't work for 20 years. It'd be really hard to then follow that up with something positive. So I think depending on the job that you're looking at, what your specific situation is, your relationship with the person that you're talking to for the job. It's up to you, but certainly different strategies on using sort of the initial narrative of who am I and why am I sitting in front of you? Why did I even apply for this job? To either address the things you want to make sure you address, remove that sting, or use it to build yourself up so that when you hit those lower points that you want to explain, there's so much good stuff about you that's already in that person's mind.
Yes.
That when they find out, oh, they did take a 20-year gap, but you know what? I'm looking at this person. They certainly don't seem like they took a 20 years off of working.
Yeah.
That's, I think it really is very situation dependent.
So I'm also hearing looking at your resume from the lens of an employer. So stepping outside of your role as a job seeker, stepping into the shoes of the employer and saying, if I were an employer looking at this, what would I see? And I think we tend to skip that step, or having an outside peer reviewer look at it from that perspective. And that's a great opportunity to start to look at it that way. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I would absolutely, what you just said, I would encourage have somebody who has been in the position of looking at somebody's resume from the hiring side, look at your resume. Have them look at it very honestly and point out, if I was looking at your resume, I would ask you this, so that you can be ready for it. It doesn't mean you need to change it. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It means this is something that you're going to have to address because it's the first thing that popped out at me. Be ready. I have summer interns, people that we knew in law school, this and that will send me their resumes and say, even if I'm not applying to my firm for a job, what would you be asking? Where do you think I could make this a little bit stronger? We do that all the time, and I think especially since you're taking a course where they're having you draft a resume, use the resources that you have. Draft it, you yourself look at it, and then have somebody else who hasn't seen it before look at it and say, tell me where the soft spots are. Tell me where I should be ready when I go in here, just to have a good explanation.
And you touched on mentoring. What do you think about the importance of mentoring?
I think it's incredibly important. Finding somebody that you trust, that can give you feedback, honest feedback, that you can take in a constructive way so that you don't feel like they're just, giving you negative information to make you feel worse about what you're doing or to make you feel unqualified. But what their goal is to make you more qualified, to help you advance and be the best candidate you can be. Finding that person who's willing to do that is really important. I would stress that not only is that person important, but finding that person for you who also is willing to provide that to you. So there can be people who are incredibly qualified in their field that would be an amazing mentor if you could get their knowledge that's in their head, but they don't have the time or the inclination or the real ability sometimes to provide that. And that's a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
I mean, they have the knowledge, but getting it from them is going to be more effort than it's going to be constructive for you. Finding somebody who may not be the CEO of the company, but wants to provide you that support, wants to provide you that feedback, is much more important than what their credentials are, or that they're the boss of the company. They want to help you, so if you trust them and you're willing to let them help you, I think it can be incredibly important.